became the first and only actor to have 4 movies. This is 4 movies to make over $2 billion at the box office. You're the first actor. This is insane. I mean,
So the point here is that Zoe pretty much owns outer space, right? I may be the king of the world, but she's the queen of the universe.
As a woman in America, I am breaking down as many barriers as I possibly can without having to be hateful or complain about it. I'm not troubled by the way that I look. I'm not troubled by the skin. I never looked at my blonde friends or my darker friends and said, well, I wish I looked like her.
Zoe Saldana's hatred for being put in a box made her an icon. But as she successfully broke out of these boxes by shooting down barriers of sexism, racism, and other isms, she also shot herself in the foot.
This is disrespectful.
They really put a prosthetic nose and blackface on Zoe Saldana. There are so many layers and reasons to why this is just like incredibly offensive to Nina Simone's legacy and everything she worked for.
Zoe she is a woman of color.
Yes.
But I think that I think that we need to be a little more true to our stories.
There's so many other actresses that were absolutely right on for that role.
It became clear that what she had used over and over for her success was also responsible for what could have ended it all. But before she would be part of some of the highest grossing movies, her journey to stardom started in one of the busiest cities in the world, New York.
Long white beaches, surf fishing, all sorts of entertainment.
Zoe Yadira Saldana Perego was born on June 18, 1978 in New Jersey, but raised in the multicultural community of Jackson Heights, New York. Her mother is Puerto Rican and her father is Dominican, making her a Black Latino. But the Saldana family didn't always know the peace and stability that Zoe and her sisters were born into. Decades before Zoe's birth, the Caribbean nation was nowhere to raise a happy family, so her grandmother made the trip north.
Thanks to her, when she arrived here in 1961, running away from a dictatorship from Dominican Republic, New York, America opened its doors to her and she was able to manifest her dreams. And part of that was providing a better life for her children. And here I am, a fruit of that labor, a product of her sacrifices. And I'm always grateful, but always very well aware that that conversation around immigration is not as simple, it's not as easy and as glorious for everybody.
Growing up as a middle child, she would receive less affection compared to her older and younger sister. This led to her being more of the troublemaking tomboy and not the stereotypical graceful and angelic girl child her other sisters were.
I'm the middle child, so I was nobody's favorite. That was just like, you know, it's okay, it's okay. I was, you know, I was content, I was happy.
Let's go get Max.
Wait, but did you know? So you knew you were nobody's favorite then? You knew that everybody...
Oh yeah, because my grandmother sometimes would tell me, but it was always because I was so mischievous, and some of my mom's friends or some aunts too, they would go like, well, are you guys attending the Christmas party? Well, bring the older one and the little one. Just leave the middle one. Just try to leave the middle one. Because I was very mischievous. I was like, you know, and I had a thing with like...
I'm doing it for my sisters, I'm doing it for my brothers, and I don't care who tells me that I am not this and I am not that. I know who I am.
You know, starting fires and stuff. Like,
that's a little more than mischievous.
That is different.
Yeah,
I think...
Wow.
If you're an arsonist,
I was just very
it's
curious
understandable
child.
not to want you at a party. Like,
but it was a phase, it was a phase.
Yeah.
But it was a phase she never really grew out of, but rather embraced. It would influence her role models, the type of shows she loved, and ultimately, the path she would follow.
I want to be really loyal with the fact that when I was little, I didn't want to be Snow White. I didn't want to be Cinderella. I wanted to be like Ellen Ripley. And I was for Halloween. I was either Ellen Ripley. I was not allowed to be Sarah Connor until I was like 7 or 8. And I was a ninja every Halloween.
Her life was rather normal for the first few years, until 1987, when tragedy struck.
Don't ask me to do that, because I can't. I can't.
know that you guys obviously experienced a tragic loss with your dad at a young age. You were 9 years old when your dad passed away in that car accident, and your mom moved you and your family to the Dominican Republic.
Still to this day, I remember his laugh. He was a great dancer. You know, he just knew how to play instruments. He had a knack for grabbing a guitar and spending 36 hours just with this guitar and on his lap, and then he would end up like playing music, and you're like, that's amazing. But I am happy that the 9 years that I had a father, that I was loved by that dad.
Along with having to deal with the reality of her father gone, the change in culture would take Zoe a little adjusting to get used to.
The culture was very different. You're growing up in a city that is such a melting pot of cultures, and Santa Claus, and McDonald's.
Freezing cold.
Yes, and people that spoke English with different languages, names of your friends that you couldn't pronounce, you know, holidays that friends celebrated that were very, very different. So from that, to move to like a small island where you know it belongs to your family, like that's kind of like how you feel, because that's where you used to visit in the summers, but now you're going to stay there indefinitely, and the climate is very humid and hot. There are no pine trees, therefore there are no Christmas trees, and there's no Santa Claus. It's 3 magicians. Everybody speaks just one language. It's one religion.
But some of the changes she and her sister experienced weren't the type to get comfortable with.
It does exist in Latin America. I lived partially in Dominican Republic, where colorism is equated to your social status.
The society was very different because it's a different environment, and it's a bit more harsh, especially for women. So it was a very big culture shock for us, and at many times we were a little misunderstood and picked on by kids, because kids can be really mean. When they don't understand somebody or somebody feels different from them, they pick on them. And I know it's a defense mechanism. Now that I'm an adult, I see it as that. But it was very hard for all 3 of us.
Tutors. I had a tutor that taught me to speak Spanish, because I didn't know how to speak Spanish when we moved to Dominican Republic. My sisters are like my closest friends that I talked super intimately with. My mother was just like amazing. My theater teacher, Susan Montes in Brooklyn from Faces, like, what up, Susana Montes? Like, she was phenomenal. Just every time I would meet someone and I would feel like that person was generous enough to share their time and their knowledge and their experiences with me, I would latch on to them and sort of just feed off of whatever they had.
Another thing that helped Zoe was ballet.
Careful with that one. You break it, you bought it.
Okay, stop. You were a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
With secret ambitions to be a chicken farmer, but ballet dancer.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. But I will be a chicken farmer.
However, after years of dancing with the Espacio de Danza Academy, her decline in her interest in ballet coincided with when her family moved back to New York in 1995. A now 17-year-old Zoe Saldana was entering a new chapter in her life, one where she was no longer a child and one where she would pick up a new hobby, acting. It wouldn't be long before she started making headway in her acting career. After an appearance in an episode of Law & Order, the turn of the millennia would see her reach new heights and gift her the breakthrough role that would catapult her to stardom.
I don't know, Sergey. I'm with Jody. I believe a girl's had a right to know what kind of hound she's saving herself.
How about this? Huh?
And turn out. Jesus, she heard you. Excuse me? She heard you. We all heard you. You don't have to speak to her like that. Anyone can see she...
Not only did the movie allow her to reconnect to her childhood hobby of ballet, but it showed her that her true calling was acting.
Because it was my very first movie, and I was in awe every day of everything pertaining to a film set. It was also a marriage where I was saying goodbye to a part of my life that I had done for so long, which is ballet, and saying hello to this new form of art that I was so curious about. But I needed a sign for me to know that I was on the right path, that I was actually knocking on the right door, and that That movie was like chef's kiss. It kind of sealed the deal for me.
After appearances in Get Over It and Snipes in 2001, her next big role would come in 2002 with the movie Crossroads.
Zoe Saldana, Taryn Manning.
I haven't seen you since Christmas. Dylan, we have to plan the wedding.
But working with someone like Britney Spears at the height of her career, when she was still early in hers, seemed like a daunting experience.
I was a little afraid. So I was like, I just know, it's like, don't get ahead of yourself. Do not upstage. Like, don't ruffle any feathers. Just do a good job. I remember that because just all the reps. She had like so many reps and so many producers, and there was so much privacy around.
But what she admired the most about Britney wasn't even her talent or stardom.
It was big, you know. She was sort of like the biggest artist that I had met, where it was just such a big commotion, like all these security people, so many people around her. But when you really got to meet her and talk to her, which was, you know, it didn't happen as much as you would think, even though we were doing a film together, she was such a sweet person. And I remember around that time, there were so many artists that were rising, pop artists, especially female singers, that were just as talented, or even, you know, could hold a note more than Britney would, but they weren't as famous as she was. And then I realized after meeting her that she had something that they didn't, and she has a good heart.
After that, she went on to slap Captain Jack Sparrow in the 2003 Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl.
Anna Maria.
Despite this being the biggest franchise she was a part of so far in her career, what went on behind the scenes didn't match the theatrics on the big screen.
There was just a lot of politics that you would have had to navigate, and it just, I just felt really lost and very small in that big machine. But I'm happy for all the actors that benefited from this, because they certainly did, and they went off to have amazing careers, and I followed their careers and felt really inspired. But for me, it was definitely an experience not worth repeating. And I really had a not so good experience because of just the poor management at that time. And Jerry Bruckheimer knows this. We spoke about it. Eventually, I think he read somewhere where I had, you know, expressed my discomfort and my disappointment. And years later, he apologized, which felt really quite honorable.
Thankfully, after the bad experience with Pirates of the Caribbean, things became better.
I sent a tape, and Steven Spielberg saw it and cast me from like various, you know, notes and tapes that he kept asking me to do from New York. And then I met him, and I had worked also with Diego Luna and Tom Hanks, and it was a dream come true.
With each passing movie, she was getting harder and harder not to notice. Zoe Saldana didn't just want to play supporting roles. No one becomes a household name by being second fiddle. So if she was going to steal the spotlight, she would have to venture where she's never been to in her career. It wasn't going to be easy, but thankfully, she had the drive and, of course, a great support system.
I think in order for you to fight for your dreams, you need to have people around you that see you fighting, are happy that you're fighting, and want to enable you. I think that's super important.
When I was 19, I booked a Burger King commercial. Like you live like in a building, you know, and one block is filled with like 6 buildings. They were all outside, and they had called the neighbors, and I'm like, guys, stop. And I felt like, oh, I think I'm gonna go places after this, you know?
And how much do you trust me?
Following her hit movie Colombiana, where she was the main star, things became even better for Zoe. You see, just as her involvement with ballet had gotten her her first role, her love for sci-fi stories as a kid would propel her to stardom in the most unimaginable way possible.
I grew up in a household where my mother, if she wasn't watching science fiction, she was reading it. And I remember I read Dune when I was very, very young, and I was Lady Jessica for many Halloweens. I was a Bene Gesserit. And there was something about the curiosity of what can happen there, and having a lot of respect through my mother's eyes for the writers and creators that were able to imagine the unimaginable. So filmmakers like J.J. Abrams, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg are not people that I would have thought that a girl from Queens would get to work with in the first, 7 or 8 years of my acting career, and yet I did.
I was shooting Avatar when J.J. Abrams came to set to visit, and he basically loosely offered me the part right then and there, and I didn't know what he was talking about. My team hadn't informed me that he really wanted me to be Officer Uhura, and I guess all these conversations were happening without me knowing. And I remember that morning, Jim looks at me, he goes, I'm doing something for you, and you're welcome.
She may have landed this role because of Avatar, but her whole life has been preparing her for this genre.
It is the number one element that is solely responsible for my career in the action genre. Had I not had an athletic background, I don't think I would have explored action sort of movies.
She was also happy that she got to work with people who would take healthy advantage of her masculine side.
That's the one thing that I was always enamored with, his female characters. And I feel like he, as a filmmaker, the one thing that he and James Cameron have in common is that they're unapologetic about showcasing a woman's masculinity without taking away her beauty and her fragility. That's why I respect Luc Besson's Femme Fatales and Jim's Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor.
In the same way she had strong female fictional characters to idolize, she soon became one herself. But even after starring in one of the most iconic franchises and being part of the highest grossing films of all time, Zoe Saldana still hadn't played her most beloved role yet. Enter James Gunn. Saldana's resume was all the convincing he needed, but Zoe nearly didn't take the Gamora role.
So you say you were pondering whether or not to do it. This has kind of become your niche right now. You have Avatar, Star Trek, and now Guardians as well.
I didn't want to just do just films that take place in space back to back, but they come in such beautiful packages, with great filmmakers, great studios, a great cast, and it's always a beautiful challenge for me.
A challenge that rewarded sci-fi lovers with a very new character who wasn't the most popular in comics, but very revered on the big screen, thanks to her.
Oh, everyone outside, all green right now to celebrate Zoe Saldana.
Her performance won awards for both her and her team.
The winner, ladies and gentlemen, is Zoe Saldana for Avatar.
And the critics' choice is Guardians of the Galaxy.
And the Oscar goes to Avatar: The Way of Water.
It is my great honor to present the Peabody Institutional Award to Star Trek.
Zoe pretty much owns outer space, right? I may be the king of the world, but she's the queen of the universe.
But Zoe Saldana didn't want to be known as the queen of sci-fi alone. She wanted more.
So I'm reminded that as an artist to never stop searching and to continuously challenge myself. I definitely want to go back and play some Earthlings for sure.
Well, we love seeing you on screen no matter what.
Of my true. Zoe wanted to attain a solid place amongst the best actors ever, but that would require her to go where she's never been before and take on a role in a genre that's reserved for only the best of actors, an antithesis of her science fiction works that the world knew and loved her for. A biopic. Oh, how we love biopics. Jamie Foxx's portrayal of Ray Charles in the 2004 movie Ray won him multiple awards, including an Academy Award for Best Actor. Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer gave him, along with Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr., Oscars, and it was important, especially for Robert.
This is the highest point of Robert Downey Jr.'s long and illustrious career. Well, one of the highest points.
It was his first individual Academy Award after so long as a co-star of Zoe's in the MCU.
Hey, someone finally got your name right.
Let's do this, G.
Zoe would take the same career path to surpass her achievements.
But that's how I feel. Right. I mean, life is short.
Right.
You don't get to. People are not easy to know.
Yes.
They're not easy to know. So if you don't tell them how you feel, You're never gonna get anywhere.
You see, Mary J. Blige was initially cast for the Nina Simone role.
I always wanted to play Nina Simone. And I would love to do that. I would put my every single all into that.
However, due to financial issues, she was replaced with Zoe Saldana. Unfortunately, this would turn out to be a disaster.
What does that have to do with playing music?
Twitter users have brought up the problematic use of blackface and how it only perpetuates the issues of race in Hollywood, while some are saying that it's a bit problematic to suggest that Zoe is not black enough for the role.
At first, she tried to fight the negativity.
That I know who I am, and I know what Nina Simone means to me, so that is my truth and that set me free. You know, and I can only rely on that and maintain as much humility as possible so that when I have to face the world and we have to then give the movie to the world to see and share it with them, that if it comes back in any other way, if it comes back in a negative fashion or positive, I'm gonna keep my chin up because that's who I am and that's who I'll be, and Nina was like that too, so I did it all out of love for Nina, out of love for my people and who I am and my pride of being a black woman and a Latina woman, an American woman, and that's my truth. Even in my social feed, all that I read, that's why I stopped reading my feeds because one, the trolls are like insane people, but you have my black people and then you have my Latino people, and all that they're doing is trying to figure out what I am. As opposed to just appreciate the fact that I'm working.
She also had some backup.
I support Zoe Saldana 100%. I mean, this is a creative medium. Like, why do we all have to like look a certain way, be a certain way? I mean, this is what we're fighting for, is that freedom. And let's not be confused. Zoe Saldana is of African descent. So do you know what you're really fighting?
Not everybody agreed with her.
There's so many other actresses that were absolutely right on for that role. Viola Davis, musically India Ari, and that's just two off the top of my head. The makeup alone frightened me because I was like, I didn't know what I was looking at. Do I love the actress who's playing her? I love that actress. Is this necessarily the role that I would have chosen?
This is disrespectful.
They really put a prosthetic nose and blackface on Zoe Saldana. There are so many layers and reasons to why this is just like incredibly offensive to Nina Simone's legacy and everything she worked for.
As expected, the film was a box office disaster, selling just $22,584 worldwide. The ratings too were laughable, with Rotten Tomatoes giving it just 2%, while Metacritic spared 27%. Only IMDb was generous with its 5.4 out of 10 score. However, this repulsion towards the movie wasn't due to a lack of talent on Zoe's part. It was a matter of racial misrepresentation, something Zoe knew very little of.
We were raised like that by a mother who purposely protected us from that.
Believe it or not, a lot of people in Latin America and a lot of people in Central America and a lot of people part of North America who are of Hispanic descent or Latin descent, a lot of them don't believe racism or colorism is an issue because they don't talk about it.
I'm not troubled by the way that I look. I'm not troubled by the skin. I never looked at my blonde friends or my darker friends and said, well, I wish I looked like her.
Instead, Zoe has other concerns.
America is racist. Of course, there's racism everywhere. I'm not saying that there isn't. But I think that sexism is much stronger and it's much more aggressive. The moment a woman gains some kind of position of power, she will be questioned, just like any other person that would be rising. That's the way my understanding tells me that it should be. But women sometimes are questioned because it's almost like you're trying to prove our incompetence. All the CEOs are primarily males. Like, art is primarily male-driven. Like, male painters are the ones that are more successful. Primarily, there are women, but the fact that we're just so scarce, is that the word?
Yeah.
It lets you know that logically there's an imbalance. So, and it has to do with trusting leadership in women.
Nevertheless, after a few years of reflection, Zoe had a change of heart.
I should have never played Nina. I should have never played Nina. I should have done everything in my power with the leverage that I had 10 years ago which was a different leverage, but it was leverage nonetheless. I should have tried everything in my power to cast a black woman to play an exceptionally perfect black woman. It's growing. It's painful. I thought back then that I had the permission because I was a black woman, and I am. But it was Nina Simone, and Nina had a life and she had a journey that should have been, and it should be honored to the most specific detail, because she was a specifically detailed individual about her voice and her opinions and her views and her music and her art.
After an apparent fall from grace with the Nina biopic, Zoe Saldana would find her stride again doing what gave her respect in Hollywood in the first place.
She is back in the new Star Trek Beyond, taking charge as Lieutenant Uhura in the highly anticipated sequel.
Obviously, you're very busy because you're a part of 3 huge franchises.
I couldn't have planned it better.
Star Trek,
I'm telling you.
right. Avatar, and Guardians of the Galaxy.
This is insane. I mean,
It never gets old. I'm pinching myself.
At the same time, she was reaching new heights. Things were changing in the country she had called home for so long.
Nearly 180,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens.
I'm worried. I don't know, this is the first time as an American that I'm looking out, and I'm sort of thinking, I'm a little worried.
Zoe wanted to be a superhero, not just on the big screen, but in real life as well.
And Latinos are the fastest growing minority group and the most marginalized according to its size and growth. Right. So I think that these are important things to understand.
To create awareness of the ordeals of many Latino immigrants like herself, she decided to tell the world their story the best way she knew how, in front of a camera. As if this movie couldn't be more personal enough, the brain behind it was that of her husband, with whom she has 3 sons.
He's an immigrant from Italy. I'm a daughter of immigrants.
I want to use another tools like cinema because it reach more people and we can have more conversation about humanity. And I felt that the border was a great place to create a romantic story, but talk about big issue about humanity.
And with that came the humanitarian authenticity that she never truly captured with the Nina role. Because at the core of who she is, expressing empathy through a display of strength has always been her forte. She used it to find her own path and refused any narrative bent on telling her who or what she should be. She has not only done it for herself, but has shown others like her, women and people of color, that her truth is not exclusive to her and her fame isn't a means of autonomy, but a tool to impact change and prove that nobody should be a stranger to the beauty of living outside the box.